And oh, let me just change my mic. Oh no, you're muted. It's, you're muted.
Sorry about that.
It's-
It was me.
I can hear you
Can you
now.
hear me okay?
Yeah, yeah, that's great. How are you?
Yeah. I'm well, thank you. I just had a mini break,
Oh,
so
good.
it was nice. Yeah,
I'm
very
pleased to
nice.
hear that.
What about you? How are the strikes going and everything?
Yeah, I was at the we did like a rally last week,
Mhm.
which had good energy. We had a email from the Vice Chancellor the week before saying we're going to impose this anyway. So it's kind of dampened some of the mood while
Yeah,
still giving us something to go with. So I think there's a decision today on sorry, I'm just being called by EE. Okay. Yeah, there's a decision today on whether or how we progress with the industrial election because there is some planned for later this month, but we don't
hmm
know because as well the time of the semester it becomes less kind of
yeah,
valuable, and so it would kind of into mind as to how it goes forward. But no, I mean it's trying to give them a strong signal while at the same time you know that there's some fatigue already with members,
yeah,
so yeah, it's a difficult balance. I know when I know you had more, much more industrial action and action against the institution
yeah.
last year. We heard from one of your branch. I don't know if it was the branch chair or he
Was
spoke at
it
the.
Matt Perry?
Yeah, it might have been. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, he's our chair. He's been he's been involved for a long time. He's got a lot of
yeah,
experience.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, it was a good out. It was a really brilliant outcome in Newcastle. So no, I think it's we don't. I think we're kind of focused on now. There's the carrot they're dangling is the local level um pay award, but also this idea of fire and rehire is the kind of stick that they kind of we want to clarify
Mhm.
what that is. So
Yeah.
there's those two quite important issues that are still on the table, I think. Shall we let
I just,
Marie-Pierre in?
yes, I
Yeah.
just saw your email as well. So
Oh yeah.
yeah, that sounds really good.
Yeah.
I'll reply later. But yeah,
Oh great.
thank
Yeah, yeah. That's great. I'll let her in. Hello,
you.
Marie-Pierre.
Hello.
Hi Mark, hi Anna. Can you hear me?
Hi.
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay, good. I have a bit of a panic. I had a meeting this morning and the sun wouldn't turn up, so it was a disaster. And so
Oh
I'm really
no.
reassured. Oh, gosh.
No, we can definitely hear you.
Yeah, it's
That sometimes
clear.
can be an issue on Teams, but no, that seems to all be coming through fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here for today, and hopefully we can have a nice conversation and maybe be a bit radical, or at least try and push for something that's changing the conversation in the sector and adding to your own wonderful work. So
Are you very kind? No, thank you for having me. It's quite humbling, really. Yeah, yeah, and I've been reading your work, and it's so interesting and relevant to what I do. Thank
no,
you
thank
both.
you. And yeah, I think there's a lot of mutual respect and admiration in the
It's
room. So
exactly what. Yeah, I'm a very nervous speaker, so I've been working on my notes. I'm trying not to read, so it flows a bit more, if that's okay
yeah,
with
of
you.
course. But no,
Um,
notes is fine. No, that's why I wanted to give you those in advance, so you felt that you had
yeah,
time to prepare anything you wanted to articulate. And yeah, I've always feel the same. I want to express things in a particular way, and so sometimes you want to have some notes for that.
mm, mm,
But
yeah. I also would like to share a couple of slides, so
yeah,
not
of
at the
course.
start, but as part of a presentation when we sort of explore what we can do in terms of intervention.
Yeah,
Um, I thought some of the slides because I've been working with Sally Peary now. Used to be Sally Campbell Goldman. I find some of the images are often way more telling than my mumbling.
absolutely.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
a visual can be very powerful. No, I
yeah,
completely agree. No,
yeah.
Should
just
we try that now
yes,
before
good idea,
everybody
Anna.
joins?
Yes, and the technical stuff would be helpful just to kind of
Yeah,
iron out at this stage.
make sure that it
Mm.
works.
Um, Just opening a sort of random. Yeah, so I'm not
Perfect.
gonna. I don't want to share the slides at all, just two. So basically, when I talked about the research informed intervention, what we can do, what institutions can do, that's something I'd like to use to sort of support the discussion. And then also when I talk about sort of actions I'm taking to, sorry.
These are lovely slides, though. They're great.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I mean, I can show them to people a little bit as part of a discussion, depending how it goes. But
Yeah.
the other one I wanted to show was this one because we've been using the slides as an exhibition. I think you're probably aware of it. I don't know. Do you know about this or?
Yeah,
No.
I think you mentioned it because I attended your report
Yeah, I know you were
launch. So
there.
I think you
Yeah,
mentioned it there, but no, yeah, that'd be nice to talk
yeah.
to you again. Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, no, basically this is the work that Sally and I developed together a few years back, and we were so happy with it, but we thought we needed to share it with the world a bit, and we turned it into an exhibition. So that's the idea of sort of pushing back the carefree norms,
Great.
having this physical installation. And in the top right, this is Middlesex University, a couple of years ago, I think 1 year ago, on Carers Day. And this was right in the middle of a really big atrium. So this is, these are the way we're trying to sort of push back against sort of a carefree, careless university.
Yeah.
And I wanted to share this as sort of visual, actual examples of what we can do.
Oh, that's excellent. No, that looks perfect.
Okay, so I'll stop
No,
sharing.
I'm just while you're talking, I'm just checking that I've got the link that has been sent to attendees. So if I need to, I'll just make sure I've got that as an email that's gone out. Should have done, but let me check because it's email.
Can I check that people are all coming from?
Oh, it looks like people are joining. Yeah.
People are coming from networks in higher education, or they're coming
Yes,
from
that's right.
just higher education. Is that correct?
Yes, it should be higher education. I
Yeah,
did put an advert out on LinkedIn, but
yeah,
it's kind of framed as higher education. So yeah, I suspect it'll be a self-selecting sample there. Yeah. No, there was an email that went out with the link, so that's good. You want to check these things sometimes. And we have people in the room now, which is lovely to see. I think that's good. Thank you all for joining. I will be starting shortly, but I'll be kind to people. We will be careful with our webinar today and make sure we can let people just join us. We kind of drift just a little bit after past because you tend to get that people join at that point. So we'll just let a few people come along at that stage, and then I'll properly start at that point.
Do you mind me asking how many people have registered?
Yeah, so we have 44 on Eventbrite, and then I think internally I've shared it a little bit. So there may be, it's difficult to say how many that will translate into.
Yeah, yeah.
But what we do is we record the first bit, which will be like the conversation that we have, and then when we open the floor, we'll stop recording at that point so people can speak openly, and then that will, so there'll be something that people who haven't been able to attend live can catch up on the beginning.
But that's sort of internal to your network, not.
Yeah, but what we have is we have a YouTube channel, but it's kind of unlisted, so it's for those who want to catch up. They can follow a link to that.
So you need the link rather than stumble upon it.
Yes. Yeah. It's kind of it's mainly for people who haven't been able to attend live.
Yeah.
I will give it a couple, maybe one more minute just to see if others join us, and then we can probably get started, and perhaps people will drift in as we get going. But I'll maybe load up. I have 1 or 2 slides just to Anna, are you okay just to let people in as they come along? Thank you. Yeah. I've just got a little slide just to get us started, just to set the scene. Yeah, a couple more people joining there.
I'm just going to take a picture of the screen.
Okay, I'll get started. Hello and welcome everyone to our most recent UK PACT webinar. This is number 13, but that's not a bad omen. This is just it's the number we're on. And also we're on April Fool's Day today, so another omen, but I'm sure that this is all going to be a peripheral concern for what is an important conversation. And I'm really delighted to be having this conversation today with Professor Marie-Pierre Moreau from Anglia Ruskin University. And this idea of a careful university, something that I've been conscious of for many years now, and I know Anna Lopez, my co-chair with UK PACT, is also, it's very important to her as well. So before we get into the conversation, as I have a captive audience, I just want to briefly mention that we are a organisation of parents and carers across higher education. We have a website, ukpact.org, which we encourage members to navigate to and learn about. I'm in the process of developing a carers section, actually, which I developed on the back of Marie-Pierre and colleagues, the launch of your report. So I made sure I developed off the back of that. In the future, we have a couple of further webinars if you're interested in learning more about the different topics that intersect with parents and carers. So we have a session with Professor Sarah Jewell on the 20th of May at 1 p.m. and I'll be advertising that after this. And we have another session that I'm just renegotiating the date for with Professor Emma Bannister and Dr. Helen Norman on some of their research on parental leave as well. For dads, and I've been establishing a dads group, we have a session with a PhD student, Dan Dehan, on his research on male carers, which I think will be fascinating. So he's got some early findings that he's going to talk to us about. And finally, just to kind of spotlight, we have a hybrid workshop, which we are going to be running on the 22nd of May. People who are already in our distribution list may well have received a hold the date email for this from Bernardo, our research associate. So if you're interested in attending in person or online a workshop about what we do and looking ahead as to what we can do next, we'll be delighted for us to join us. We did an event a couple of years ago and it was really great, and we got a lot from it, and I think members really enjoyed meeting each other in person as well. So please get in touch if you'd like to learn more about that, and yeah, put the date in your diary. It'll be up in Newcastle, so we'll welcome you to the north. Right, we're going to talk about a careful university and the report from Anglia Ruskin University, Towards a Careful University, a national study of staff who are caregivers in the UK higher education sector. And I'm thrilled to welcome Professor Marie-Pierre Moreau. What I'm going to do now is stop sharing so we can have a proper conversation and we can talk as people instead of having slides. And the way we're going to do this, so for people on the call, we're going to have this section recorded, and we always try and structure it this way. So we know parents and carers have demands on their time, so can't always attend in person or at the kind of live moment. So we'll have a recorded section, and then we'll have an open forum for further questions, which will be not recorded at that stage. And I'll share the recorded section, which is going to be in a conversational format with me and Marie-Pierre to start with. So with that in mind, we'll get into the conversation. So Marie-Pierre, would you like to introduce yourself to begin with? Or is there anything you'd like to say about yourself before we get into the conversation?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. Thank you for your kind invitation, Mark, and I'm really pleased to be here. So I'm Marie-Pierre Moreau. I'm a professor in the Sociology of Education, Work and Inequality on Garroskin on the Cambridge campus. I've got sort of two types of interest. One is more related to sort of gender-based inequities in schools and higher education and the workplace generally. And the other one has been, I think that's probably fair to say, it's been a shift over the years, where I've been more interested in issues around care and carers in education, especially higher education contexts, both looking at students and staff. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. I mean, it nicely leads me on to my first question. So your report foregrounds those intersectional experiences of carers, and it promotes this idea of a careful university, and we'll get into that idea in a minute. But I just wonder if you wouldn't mind defining who you're talking about when you're talking about this idea of carers, and perhaps unpacking that very idea within higher education.
Yeah, that's such an interesting and topical question. So I think this particular report builds on research I've been conducting since 2010 actually. So I often say that story because for me that's the sort of original story of a research where I was a research fellow and PhD student, and then I had my daughter, and I thought that sort of triggered the interest because I thought, I was actually having my daughter in a pushchair, taking her to nursery on a campus. And when I had this bold moment where I thought, isn't that interesting that there's so much work on the sort of mothering academic combination, but so little on being a student and a parent. And obviously that sort of started my thinking. I went to Nuffield Foundation, applied for a bid, I was successful. That was really nice because being a parent and researching parenting was really, it was very meaning making. And over the years, so I've been working on all sorts of categories of carers, and I'm going to define them in a minute, in higher education, both students and staff, leading finally to this really big report we've been working on for 2-3 years now. So really pleased to have it out. So for the report, really, what I wanted to do is to have a very broad, encompassing definition for carers. I think it's, there's lots of the original research tends to compare carers and non-carers, but I also wanted to be able to look at different categories of carers and be able to sort of deconstruct the carers category because it's encompassive, and not just intersectionality, which I know is a bit of a buzzword, but look at, what sort of caring responsibilities do you have? How do they sort of have an impact on your life, on your work, and also who is this person doing the care work? Because what we can see is that the way you are treated as a carer is very much depending on race, gender, class, and other factors. So for me, that was really important to define carers in a very broad way, including all sorts of caring responsibility. And we also use self-identification for the report, which is not unproblematic, because we know that different groups of people will be more or less likely to see themselves as carers. So that sort of bias it a little bit. But I also felt that containing care, which is such an elusive category, it's both an emotion, it's a form of labor, etc., was quite problematic. So we kept it very open. So that's the focus there of this report. And it's very problematic because some institutions are using different definitions. So for example, the US published, I think it was 2009, the Meet the Students report, and then 2013 Meet the Parents report after the film, and then in 2013 Meet the Carers report. suggesting that the parents and the carers are two very distinct categories.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in terms of political organizing, we need to think about how do we go about it. It may be strategic to group the two, or maybe it's not. But I think there's room for a bigger discussion. And I'm not, I realize a limitation to a definition.
No, I really appreciate that answer, and it is so nuanced. And yeah, there's the kind of dimension of being strategic and thinking how can we have the biggest impact with this, but equally there's the importance of recognizing different forms of care, and that being a broad church. So no, I think that's a really important framing. So thank you. You mentioned in the report this idea of academic norms being carefree. Would you mind just expanding a bit on that, and then perhaps thinking why is that such an important focus for us in the current context that we have?
Yeah, so I'm trying to be more consistent and coherent and use the term careless now rather than carefree.
Sure.
For some reason, because you can get that English is not my first language. I used to work both, without a distinction, and then I started thinking, carefree is a bit like child-free, it's like a happy thing.
Yes.
Yes. When you say childless, it sounds really sad, but I don't think careless. I don't know. I had a lot of thinking about it. So at the moment, I sort of settled on careless. But I think whether you use careless or carefree, obviously I'm not saying that universities are careless or carefree. I think they would collapse if there was no care involved, and in particular the extraction of free labor, caregiving within and outside the university. Okay, but I think this is definitely a nice story. We're being told that to be professional, we need to be carefree. And so that's an important preamble. But when I was sort of thinking about this seminar today, I was thinking, what is it what makes a culture careless? And I was thinking, it's convenient because I'm writing a paper on this at the moment, so I sort of linked with it quite well. I was thinking maybe this is first a culture where care and carers, in particular, carers as an expression of care, if you want, which in the sense that carers can't renounce their own caring responsibilities when these groups are excluded. So, for example, when you make rules so impossible for carers to be in, when you make expectations so out of reach for carers. So this is the work of Kathleen Lynch, on the expectations of academics in particular, but also students and other professionals in the workplace, that they have to perform to a level of expectations which is aligned with the assumption you don't have any caring responsibilities, and how that can be very exclusionary. So that can be, for example, but I think that appears in lots of different ways. For example, at the moment I have this very big international project called Intercare, and what we look at is this young carers in education, and how if they are doing more than 21-hour study time a week, they can't get the carers allowance. So it's how they're excluded because, through 1,000 paper cuts, the university or society at board is making it very difficult for them to be a carer and to belong in academia. So I thought that was one thing of carefreeness or carelessness. The second aspect, as well as exclusion, was how care and carers are rendered invisible or hidden. It's really interesting because over the years I've done lots of interviews with different types of carers, and it's interesting how the people who are already marginalized because of their other identities, so in particular women and BNE workers, etc., tend to hide their caring responsibilities because they fear misrecognition. So for me, that's another expression of carelessness. So you basically pretend to be a carer, and you sort of try to adopt the long hours, the working patterns, the geographical mobility, going to conferences. That obviously makes it very difficult. But also, therefore, the third element, maybe, it's misrecognition. And so when finally care becomes visible, how, especially if you're part of these minoritized groups in the first place, it can backfire very badly. So in one case, I remember talking to a woman who was a lecturer in university who had to leave work around 3 or 4 to go and pick up her children, and was shouted at by the line manager because she was not professional enough. So I thought this is an interesting example there. But if you don't mind me adding to that a little bit, I just want to say, this is not just carers as individuals who are affected by this carelessness of academic norms. It's also care itself. So what I want to say there is that it's the way we operate is misrecognizing, underpaying, and hiding care. I mean, this is interesting for me because I'm on a number of academic promotion panels. I'm on different recruitment panels, and it's actually really rare and interesting for me to observe, for example, that what falls under good academic citizenship is often not a pathway for promotion. So you see people who are caring deeply, providing lots of support to colleagues and students, but they're not getting the reward. So it's not just the carers, it's also care work altogether, which is subjected to these 3 different categories of misrecognition. And I mean, this is not my work, but I'm thinking of the work of Sandra Acker on this, sleeplessness in academia, and more recently the work of Bruce McFarlane as well. So this is quite interesting, I think, and relevant to this conversation.
Really thoughtful, and yeah, thank you very much for that. Yeah, I mean, I think the way that acts of care are kind of marginalized in the norms of the neoliberal university, I think members on this call can probably all recognize that. I think it's something that, the way you've articulated that, I think there's the structural, but there's also the kind of cultural, and the way individuals mask is something that is a project in itself to make it more acceptable and more welcome and included within university context. So if we think about what could be, so I tend to write and frame things in utopian and dystopian ways. If we start with a utopian mindset, rather than necessarily thinking of a blueprint, but what do you imagine as a possible higher education that would be careful? So in your ideal vision of it, what kind of tangible experiences would you have for care?
I like that I'm talking about utopia and vision, and have this planetary background behind you. The big picture. Yeah, so I mean, I was thinking about it as I was preparing for this meeting, and I think for me the starting point would be to fully appreciate that we are all involved in relationships of care. Otherwise you and I wouldn't have survived into adulthood. Yeah. Yes. I think we can agree on that. This is sort of obvious, but I think we need to. So the real question is not, what is care here? Is care necessary? It is fair. And I think the question is more who is giving and who is receiving care. And it's sort of thinking of Kathleen Lynch's concept of affective equality, who gives and who receives love, care, and solidarity, which is a definition from a 2009 book, Affective Equality. So it's not reciprocal, and I've written about this in an article with Marie Robertson in 2019. But so I think utopia would necessarily would require to center care in everything we do. I'm going to expand a little bit, taking up the call of Joanne Tronto and more recently Captain Lynch. So going back to Joanne Tronto's definition, it's caring for each other, but it's also caring for the world. And I think that requires some sort of radical redefinition of how university operate. And that means changing assumptions about workers and scholars in particular, finding ways of working together which are anchored in the collective, defining agendas which considers how we can work together for the better good. That's very utopian. And I think this requires that we move away from the sort of individualistic neoliberal approaches. Although the carefreeness, thinking of Descartes, cogito ergo sum, I think for I am, is already very embedded in the sort of construction of a modern university. So it's not, I don't think tackling neoliberal systems per se is going to fix the problem. But I think that it's definitely exacerbating the problem with the sort of expectations of performativity, being hypermobile, building a portfolio, having linear career, as well, and the sort of bottomless approach to academic work. There's always more you can do. You can always write another paper or a better paper, etc. So yes, moving away from these approaches, but also what I particularly dislike at this time is how care as over equality matters have been appropriated in very neoliberal ways by EDI agendas in ways which are very performative rather than meaningful. So it's turning into a sort of box ticking exercise. I mean, it's interesting, for example, paid care early is a really good idea, but a number of universities have introduced it. But when you actually look at the measure, you realize that they introduced 1 day paid care early. And I think it's ticking a box on the happiness one. That was cynic in me thinking that. But is it actually changing fundamentally the experiences of carers? I am not quite sure. So I think for me, care is not something that needs to be neutralized so that we can be more efficient. It's something that needs to be valued, centered in our culture, and it must be the end in itself. The caring culture is the end. It's not. It doesn't. There shouldn't be a business case made for caring culture to be the end. Well, I find that often the sort of care and equity agenda is the way to extract more free labor often, and that is not a way that I visualize this utopia. Sorry, that was very long.
No, I think that was great. I mean, I agree with you. Like centering a culture of care in itself being the end, not having to kind of instrumentalize it. I think that's something that I equally aspire to. I think what I'm interested to know now is, where have you encountered pockets of practice where you might say they're heading in that direction, and what we might learn from them as say an institution or a group within an institution that is starting to sort of prefigure perhaps some of this in the real here and now.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there that can be said. So I mean, if you want me to tell you a little bit about your question is about the role of institution, right, in supporting the carers. So
yeah,
I mean, first I want to say I think this is a societal issue. So I'm not playing down the role of institutions as employer or as places of learning, but I think it's important to think there's only so much that universities can do. And it's also interesting to look at what happens in other countries, but including in the 4 different countries or regions, I don't know what's the appropriate word, of the UK, because there are different higher education systems and some transitional worker systems. So the solution, I think, is really about the articulation of this sort of institutional level or sector level with the national context. I think that's the first thing to say. I think in terms of what university can do, I'm really fond of the sort of social justice model developed by Nancy Fraser and expanded by Kathleen Lynch. So the idea is that care is multifaceted, and that we need to look at issues which are of an economic nature, also of a cultural nature in terms of representation, and also in terms of political nature. For example, ensuring that carers are actually involved in decision making, rather than being decided for. There's I mean, this is not an easy one. I think, you know, there are some measures which we've discussed during the launch, and there were some really interesting questions. And I remember we talked about the carers passport, for example. So these are all measures which I think can be beneficial. The paid carers leaves, you know, what I mentioned about the carers allowance. So how unfair it is that it is not accessible to students if they're studying full time. So I think it's really important that universities push back on these measures. But I don't think, I don't think anybody think that there's a one measure. It's just being sure we are having this multi-level, multifaceted intervention. But if you don't mind, I'd like to share a slide.
Yes, please do.
Would that be right?
Yes.
What's the expression that a drawing makes for a picture makes for 1,000 words?
Yes, that's right.
They just make this up. It's PowerPoint is preparing. Yes. So I just want to go. There may be opportunities to go through this. So just for people who are not familiar with this, these are our drawings by Marie-Piere on work I have conducted over the years. Yeah, so one of the, and that has been exhibited in different national contexts. So what I was a little bit reluctant to be like, oh yes, you should do this, you should take this exact measure. As I said, it feels like a cop-out. It probably is, but I think it really depends on the context, and I think it's really important that universities are talking to the carers in their institution, because we know that intersectionality is really, really important. There are also different subject cultures, so these things need to be taken into account. But here, so we were trying to draw on this idea of a rhizome by Gilles Deleuze and Félix Guattari, and to apply it to policy and how we can implement in universities policies which are fair and effective. So very often, or maybe not very often, but I mean, well, let's start again. My assumption when I started to work on and do case studies is that there would be a very rich provision at the top, a very good policy, and it would sort of magically trickle down. Yeah, so that's a tree metaphor. And I think actually, having talking to a lot of people, it looks to me that the rhizome is a better metaphor, because the rhizome is a little bit unpredictable in the ways it travels. So what we found is when we talk to colleagues, it's often the immediate work environment of a line manager, which is a problem. And the actual, especially because you have quite a relative flexibility in academia. So that flexibility often depends on your line manager. So even in the same departments, you may have people who are being treated very different with a similar set of caring responsibilities. One of the things we thought about was that it means that we can't just be happy with a policy which is very centralized. And it also means that we need to shift away from the deficit discourse, because there is nothing wrong with carers. The problem is the culture that compounds carers' difficulties. So an example is timetabling, right? If you lecture a student and I change your timetable again and again just before the term start, which happened to me as a younger parent, it makes things for you and for your student of similar circumstances. It's very difficult. So it's getting sure the approach is multidimensional. There's something central. There is also some training which is directed towards line manager in particular, and there's some sort of embedding of careful measures in everything we do. So multidimensional, multi-level. So the idea as well that so we target the different levels in the university in terms of intervention to ensure awareness, but we also ensure that we accept that different carers have different issues. For example, in the report you've talked about today, which has sort of launched this conversation, we found that people with who are parents of children with SEND, who are parents of children with SEND, and people who are looking after elderly parents are often the categories struggling the most. However, when we look in more details, we find very different types of struggles. And those caring for elderly parents, they don't have longer term impact on career, but those with same children have longer term impact. You know, this is quite obvious, but that also means the problems here are not the same. So we need to be sure we capture the different dimensions of a problem. So that could be economic, that could be cultural, that could be political, etc. That could be something which is more affective and emotional, or somebody who feels like they want to be seen. So maybe for this person, a carers network where they can participate and talk to colleagues is something they need. Or that maybe that this person just basically needs some financial support and don't want to spend more time being involved in carers network. We also think it's really important to have a collective approach. So universities should really, it's important to tailor your practices depending on the nature of the needs, but it's also really important that the person doesn't become like, seen as a problem. So it's really a collective responsibility. Understanding care as relational, but also, as I said, intersectional. So really getting sure that you take into account the fact that men or women carers don't necessarily experience, or non-binary carers don't experience similar issues. So that's the sort of thing I've been pushing for.
If I can come in at this point, I just one of your recommendations that speaks to some of this is the need for better data, so that we can actually kind of describe who are carers and actually provide an evidence base that justifies this approach in a more kind of, it speaks the language of higher education to an extent that having that basis of this is the population, and this therefore we need to address this in an urgent way because of what you said earlier about hiding and about masking or feeling that hidden carers at work, the need for that to be more kind of foregrounded as a starting point. And I think you mentioned HESA data as one of the ways that would be potentially addressed. And I know that I think I saw Andrea Todd was on the call earlier, used UCAS as well for student carers and parent carers, I should say. So is that something you feel would be a really important first step, or are there other things that would be a first step, do you think?
Yeah, I think this would, counting the carers, if I can say that, would really help with increasing visibility, and the realization that this is not, a not situation. This is really interesting. So the other project I'm involved in, the Intercare, we have conducted a survey of 3,000 young people in Poland, Germany, and the UK, and we've tried to assess the proportion of young carers in education. And we found that the percentage is between 15 and 20%, which is quite high. So, people are talking about a hidden minority, but actually it's quite significant. It's a minority, but it's not a small group. So I think this is really important to capture this information. There are challenges with it. I mean, UCAS, when it comes to students, UCAS and the OFS now have put carers on the risk register, so it becomes more embedded in the access and participation plans. But in terms of staff, this is very much left to the university to make that decision. So we have a very patchy image. And there's obviously the issue that you may be a carer one day, but maybe the person will die sadly, and you won't be a carer anymore. So, or your child may have grown up. So the data is fairly fluid. So there would need some element of some dynamic in the data capture. But the other thing I want to say is that I don't believe that visibility per se is the solution. I think visibility needs to be paired with the cognition. If there is a stigma about being a carer in your institution, and you sort of come out being a carer and are counted, and there's this carer's passport that goes left and right, and everybody can see that, I think that is an issue where you risk being seen as not necessarily very much, this person, they have young children, or they have so much going on. So, and I don't think that's what we want to see happening. So it's just visibility, yes, it's a really important step, but it must go with a cultural shift in the way we're thinking about carers.
Mhm. I had other questions that I wanted to ask, but I'm conscious of time and I would like to offer people on the call an opportunity to speak to you. I suppose if I can briefly ask you, what do you think networks could do in their institutions or even collectively across the UK? If there was one thing that we could do to start off with as a collective, what would you, is there anything in particular that comes to mind? I appreciate that's a big question, so if you don't immediately have an answer to it, Marie-Pierre, don't worry.
No, I'm not super confident telling you what to do if like, oh no, but yes, since you're asking. um, I don't know, but like maybe like identify sort of 3 or 4 strategic priorities that you could talk to your MPs or your representative about it. There's been a lot of noise around care. You know, I'm thinking the PPG, which is on not staff but young carers in education, for example, very recently published a report. They're very active. So it's just engaging with this political group to sort of and maybe learn from each other and see, you know, maybe I think universities are very competitive. So if in one network you're having this very generous paid allowance for carers, well, maybe just share this information and go to your own institution and say, well, you know, your university locally is doing that. But well, maybe a way to progress your agenda. I don't know.
I like that. I mean, it's one of the motivations behind us having a maternity and paternity leaderboard on our website is to kind of play into some of that competition. So yes, although we kind of resist the idea of the neoliberal, there are some ways that we hope can try and leverage it a little bit. Right, I'm going to open the floor to see if people on the call would like to ask questions. I will stop recording at this stage, so anyone who would like to ask a question can do so without being part of the recording.